Hello, BookTube. It's time for our long-delayed Q&A. I made an announcement video well over a week ago for 13.4K Q&A. Of course, it's 12.4. It's not 13.4. Even here, I get basic numbers wrong. But then one thing happened after another. I had a long house guest. I had a few other dark shadows cast over my normal operating procedures, but all is temporarily well. I am under a fairly crushing deadline, but it's not outside my capacity. If I could get through the two that I've had earlier this year, I can get through this one. So now it's time to get on to these questions. I asked for a bunch of questions, and I want to offer the usual caveats here. I'm not reading these from the comments section of the video where I called for them. I copied and pasted them and ported them over to a document so that I could remove all the excess stuff rather than just accidentally read it. So if I cut off your question, it isn't because I'm trying to dodge. It's just because I made a mistake. That's all. And the other point of housekeeping is that I will cut off the videos at 30 minutes until we get through all the questions, just in case I ramble. That's known to happen. All right, so let's kick things off here. Fadista starts off with question: do you ever reject reviewing a book due to the subject matter being too evocative or feeling you cannot evaluate the subject even-handedly? Don't think so. No, there are other reasons why I would reject a book. The standard refrain in the reviewing world is don't ever review a book by a friend. I've never really understood that. But I definitely subscribe to don't ever review a book by a personal enemy. And maybe that's just the South Boston Irish Catholic in me. I often think that is too strong. I might like to flatter myself and say that I could be extra objective and do that, but every time I've tried it, it has largely resulted in a review that even I can tell is not useful to the reader. Readers are a lot more sensitive to that sort of thing than some reviewers tend to think. They can pick up right away if you're airing dirty laundry or scoring old grievances. No, when it comes to the subject matter being too evocative, no, not at all. And the main reason why is because I don't subscribe at all to this attitude that so many reviewers have, and unfortunately so many book section editors have, which is that reviews have to be dispassionate, Vulcan-type, emotionless things. I am all for reading an angry review. Just show me where your anger comes from. Show it to me in the book. Don't just give me an angry review that leads me to think, well, I don't see anything in your review that's bad about the book, but I see lots of anger. So maybe you hate the author, personally. If you show me that, I'm going to feel like you're wasting my time by exercising your demons. But, for instance, what's an example of a book that had my blood boiling the whole time, but I believe my review is good? There've been lots of them. There have been apologies for all sorts of odious public figures. There was, what was the name of Michael Vick's book? Michael Vick wrote a book about his life running a multi-state dogfighting operation and his arrest for it and his alleged atonement for it. I reviewed that book. I was furious the whole time, but I don't believe I don't believe it's an example of a book that I should have left alone just because the subject infuriated me. I thought the book was legitimately infuriating. So Michael Vick, I forget the name of it. His book had there was nothing about it that was any good. There was nothing about it that was true. And I forget its stupid, preachy title. If I remember, I'll leave a link in the description down below. Let's see here. Candace Ure says, any thoughts on the works of feminist/socialist writer Charlotte Perkins Gilman? Her xenophobic beliefs on immigrants and feminist views would make for a heady combination on YouTube or in DC. Yeah, she's a perfect example of what we talk about on this channel all the time. What do you do when the writer themselves are a problem? You mentioned the yellow wallpaper here. I don't think the yellow wallpaper is anthologized everywhere. It's in every anthology that exists, and the reason for that is because it's so powerful. There's quite a bit else in Gilman that's really powerful. It's just a question of, knowing what you know about the author and reading the works anyway. Unless the odious parts of the author are so fill the work that you're basically reading them, in which case it's a tricky question. It has many sides to it. I love the fact that in this little corner of BookTube, we discuss it all the time. We don't just automatically make the kind of witch burning and book burning decisions that the rest of BookTube, unfortunately, a community dedicated to the love of books, makes without even thinking. Oh, author X has an opinion on political subject Y that's totally unconnected to any of their books, but it doesn't matter. Not only does their opinion, the fact that their opinion on political subject Y differ from mine mean that I won't read their works, it also means that I will preach to other people about their works. I'll urge other people not to read their works, and if I could, I would probably kill them. I would probably see them starve to death. Well, you really want to eat, you should have thought about the consequences of having an opinion different from mine. I've heard from many, many people, I've heard people defend it. I've heard people say, well, you know, people strike that tone in a BookTube video, but they wouldn't act that way in person. I don't believe it for a minute. Not for a minute. If somebody's willing to lecture me in a BookTube video about how J.K. Rowling is Satan incarnate, what's going to happen if they go to your house and see a row of Harry Potter books on your kid's bookshelf in their room? You think they're going to keep silent about it? Of course they're not. They're censors. They're book burners. They're busybodies. But anyway, we're not doing well with avoiding ranting. Let's try and press on here. I'd like to get this done in 3 videos. Oh, you're going to have to pardon the background noise. It's been off the charts today. I'll stop if I'm fighting the noise and let it go by, but I don't know what the reason is, except that it's the weekend, and it's going to be more noticeable in these videos because this window is open. But we'll persevere. Nick Piccarilli says, you've hinted at ghostwriting in past videos. Have I? How common is ghostwriting outside the genres where it would be expected, like celebrity books? Are there books people would be shocked to learn were actually ghostwritten? There are 1 or 2 that you maybe would be shocked to learn. Yeah. Everybody has, all writers, most writers have writerly friends. Most writers have bookish friends. There's all sorts of open and above board assisted writing. You mentioned celebrity memoirs here, political memoirs, campaign memoirs, and usually nowadays they credit the writer. Very much so, literally as a co-writer, not, for instance, what's a good example? Margaret Thatcher, the Downing Street years. I don't believe that the original versions of that book credited a co-writer. So, or Bill Clinton in his book My Life. In both cases, these people want to produce the idea of the image of them slaving away at the writing table at night, and in their acknowledgments, they will fulsomely thank the person who actually wrote the book, but there won't be any co-writing credit. Same thing with William Shatner, his Tech War books. He did a series of science fiction novels in the Tech series that are TEK, that are now completely and very wisely forgotten. And I believe in the acknowledgement section of each one of those books, he fulsomely thanks the great old science fiction writer Ron Goulart, but he at no point says that Goulart wrote the books. So you get stuff like that, but there's also all sorts of uncredited stuff, just completely sub rosa, where it is not acknowledged in any way. Sometimes where the author doesn't even acknowledge it to their publisher, even though that puts their publisher in the legal jackpot if the person doing the writing keeps proofs. And it's, I imagine, less common now, because in the 21st century is the century of no faith. Not Christian, not religion faith. I mean no faith between ourselves. No honor. The 21st century is a craven century. If you know or have anything on somebody else, even if it's going to hurt you to reveal it, you do just as a matter of course. We are a leaking century. And that has just become normalized. That no one even thinks twice about that. And every writer knows that. So if you're a writer and you're in a position where you absolutely need someone's help writing your book, and you're not going to credit them, maybe not even going to mention them to your publisher, you have to be absolutely sure of the person. And there aren't many people in the 21st century anymore you can be absolutely sure of. So the short answer to the question is, it does happen, yeah, more widely than you would think. Uh, Edward Gibbon says, hello again, Steve. I just recently finished Rebecca West Black Lamb and Grey Falcon, and I thought it was just wonderful. Thank you so much for the recommendation. Always wonderful to hear that a recommendation lands. I've recently become aware of how ignorant I am in the field of art history and have been trying to find writers and historians that I enjoy reading who are considered important in the field. Vasari, John Ruskin, Bernard Berenson, Kenneth Clark. Well, there you go. Okay, you've listed those names. I was wondering if you had a favorite art historian or maybe a couple of favorites that come to mind. Is there an art historian you find particularly brilliant? Well, art historian is such a blurry thing for me. You listed 4 very good examples, and I'm wondering, have you read those 4 deeply? Reread them? Do you know their works? Have you followed what they suggest? Not so much Vasari, but the others elsewhere. Have you chased down their influences? Their their influences and their acolytes. Have you done that? Because those 4 are a great place to start. I would also suggest it's fairly easy to do. Like, for instance, if your library has a good periodical section, keep up with the art criticism that's happening today. There isn't much of it in the mainstream press, but it does exist. If there are major exhibitions in New York or in Washington, D.C. or elsewhere, you can almost certainly count on the New Yorker to cover it. There'll be a piece on it, sometimes a very long piece, also Harper's sometimes, or the Atlantic. Keep an eye out for those sorts of things to get a taste for who's writing about art today that you like. Let's see here. William Fett says, hi, Steve. What do you think of the writings of Anna Quindlen? Never been all that wild about the writings of Anna Quindlen, except for just recently, but usually not. Do you like the book Up Front by Bill Malden? I don't know that I know that book. My last question, how much of the Appalachian Trail have you hiked? All of it. I've hiked all of it, including in one long stretch. There are all sorts of ways to do the Appalachian Trail, right? You can dip in and dip out. You do your favorite. I know some people who've been doing their favorite little local stretch of the trail as an annual ritual forever, so that you've got grandfathers on it with grandsons. I love that. Love stories like that. But you also have some people that through hike it, that just do the whole thing. It takes a long time to do the whole thing. I've done that. Let's see here. Blue Laser Ryan has a barrage of questions. Okay. Let's see here. Hey, Steve, you are the best booktuber, no doubt. Was that even up for debate? Surely I'm not. I appreciate you saying it, but surely I'm not. I can't even put covers up here. I can't even do that. I have no technical skills whatsoever. Anyway, number 1. First off, how do you deal with fame as a 28-year-old influencer? I don't see many signs of my own fame. I don't believe that it really exists, except that a lot of you send me pictures. My email is on every video. If I remember right, it's going to be on every one of these Q&A videos, and a lot of you send me photos. And I love it. I absolutely love it. This is the weirdest parasocial relationship anywhere online. I've had other YouTubers, including a couple of fairly big YouTubers, say, what on earth is going on? What on earth? These people, you give them your email and they send you pictures of their house? Well, that's wrong in so many ways. But a lot of you send me pictures. You send me pictures of your dog peacefully sleeping on the couch. You know it's going to make my night. You know they're mine as well as yours. They're my babies, of course. You send me pictures of me on an enormous wall-sized plasma screen TV where you're watching one of my videos. You send me pictures of that with, the whole family gathered around to watch videos. I don't understand it, but if I didn't see those pictures, I wouldn't know that any of that was happening. The only time that my so-called fame ever reaches out and touches me is when I am browsing books at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston and somebody approaches me. That's happened a few times, where somebody approaches me and says, are you Steve Donoghue? I watch your videos, that sort of thing. And a lot of times they do it hesitantly, and I don't understand that. If you watch my videos, I don't understand why you would hesitate, including a couple of times where the staff at the Brattle have told me that someone didn't approach me. That once I'm chatting there at the buying table, or I'm making fun of the staff, and then I walk out, I have to get back to the bean, and a person approaches them and says, was that Steve Donoghue? That just breaks my heart. Why on earth wouldn't you approach me? Why on earth? But that's the only time. When somebody says, that's the only one of the only really tangible ways I know, aside from all the photos, that anyone sees my videos. I'm just talking to myself here. Let's see here. Number 2, you brought up a book by Julian Zelizer, which is the first historical assessment of Donald Trump. Yes, and I reviewed it. Might be insightful. However, I will never read a biography of that man when they eventually come out. There's a big one. There's a big one making its way down the runway, a big 800,000 page thing. And you're right, it'll be the first of many. I think the only useful books are the ones covering what happened during his presidency, his offenses, and warn us that something like this can never ever happen again. It most certainly can. Oh, right. Yeah, I know the warning would be nice to hear, but it would be false. I have bought the books by Carol Leonnig, Philip Tucker, Bob Woodward, Adam Schiff, and Jamie Raskin. Well, okay, you've done a lot of reading about Donald Trump then, haven't you? What is a must book on the Trump presidency / January 6th insurrection that you would recommend, or is it yet to be written? It is yet to be written. The only important thing about the Donald Trump presidency is the January 6th insurrection that he organized for a long time before the day and then incited. He incited a violent mob to march on the capital of my country, execute his sitting vice president, overturn a legal election, and install himself illegally in power, presumably for life. Can you picture a situation in which he would leave power if that worked? The men who do this sort of thing always say they will leave power as soon as things stabilize. They don't. They die in office. So that is the only important thing about the Donald Trump presidency. I no longer care about his xenophobic immigration policies. I no longer care about his Muslim ban. I no longer care about infrastructure week. I don't care about any of that. No, there are orders of magnitude different. Why on earth would you read a biography of Charles Manson that didn't mention murder? Why would you do that? You wouldn't. There are sometimes people's actions make it so that their lives have only one point. Only one point. And that is the point that I would want to read about those books. It's not the main point of Donald Trump's life, I would predict. No one can tell the future. He could get hit by a bus if he were ever on street level. But if he lives, I myself believe that he will die peacefully in his bed at the age of 113. Totally out of his mind. But still, if he lives, I think the most important thing about Donald Trump in a biography of him has yet to happen. But until now, if you're writing a book now, I don't want to hear anything about any of the rest of it. I don't want to hear anything about the birther controversy or anything like that. He's the only president ever to even come close to doing that sort of thing. That's the only thing I want to read about, and it has yet to be written because a lot of the details aren't known. A lot of the details, if you make the bad mistake of watching cable news, you know that a lot of the details are being found out every day. A year ago, we had no idea how deeply involved Trump was, how extensively he planned for all of this ahead of time. And we're bound to learn more as one after another of the insurrectionists faces serious jail time if they don't turn on their superiors in what was an extremely articulated, organized attempt to overthrow the government of this country. So no, I don't think the book has been written yet, nor will it be. If it doesn't come out in the next 6 months, it won't be. Number 3 is, as a counter to Lee Strogel's The Case for Christ, how is Richard Carrier's on the Historicity of Jesus? Do you find his arguments convincing? Largely, yes. It's impossible to, when you read on the Historicity of Jesus, it's impossible to avoid the obnoxious personality of the author. So we come right back to that subject. It's impossible to ignore that. It's present on every page almost. He's an ardent but also snooty Bayesian, and all Bayesians are snooty, so it takes a lot to add on to that. And if you can ignore all of that, and you should, it's a very good work. It pretty much covers the ground. I would argue that I mean, it's an extremely extensive case. He goes into lots and lots of detail, and he makes lots of reaches that he very much does not characterize as reaches. So you'd have to know the documents really well to catch him when he's overclaiming something, which is a caution. If you don't know those documents, you should keep that in mind. Take what he says with something of a grain of salt. But I myself think that a book of the type that he was commissioned by all of his friends to write need not be so detailed or so long. especially if you're going to be Bayesian about it. The yardsticks that we use to determine the historicity of other people in history fail with Jesus completely, and they fail right away. You don't need to go into pseudepigrapha or anything like that. You don't need to dig into the weeds. They fail right away. So, the book could have been, I guess, shorter and simpler. There are other books on the subject that are shorter and simpler and a lot more fun to read. Let's see here. Richard Reed says, what was society like in America between the end of the First Continental Congress for the next year? Why are you asking me? Best book on life in America in the 18th century. There's no way. There's no way to... what was life like in America between the end of the First Continental Congress and the next year? Best book on America in the 18th century? It's a big subject. What was life like for who in that time period, for instance? It was pretty chaotic, pretty bad for business people. I can tell you that. Congratulations, Steve. I am finding Batya Ungar Sargon a fresh new point of view on our political situation. What did you think of her new book, Bad News? Bad News. I know that I read that. No, I didn't. If I'd read it, it would probably be coming to mind, but it's not. I'm drawing a blank, but I have it. I could swear that I read it and did not like it. You'll have to email me about that. I'm drawing a complete blank on it, and that's weird. If you've watched this channel, you know that doesn't usually happen. I wonder why that is. Is it just because of the horrible title? I could swear that I read the book and argued with it. I'll go back. I'll find it. It'll be full of notes. Let's see here. Tommy Umbrella. That was weird. That never happens to me. Tommy Umbrella says, "Hi, Steve. I'm not sure if you've ever told us the story of how you came to be reviewing books. Also, do you remember the first book you reviewed?" Well, the story is very simple. I was writing op-eds. I was writing scathing political op-eds. In the newspaper, you've got in the opinion section of a real newspaper, where they devote 2 pages to the opinion, to the editorial page. Generally speaking, the right hand side is your named editorial writers, and they all have 1,000 words apiece. And then the left hand side is the banner of the paper, the masthead of the paper, all that sort of the legal indicia, all that sort of thing. Usually letters. And running on the left hand side, this was a standard setup for a long time. It's maybe not standard anymore. I haven't looked at the New York Times in quite some time. On the left hand side, there usually were 3 unsigned editorials. Those are that's the op-ed page, and I was writing those and having a blast doing it. Just having a blast, weighing in about the politics of the day. And a wonderful, gentle guy who was the arts editor of the paper. He asked me to write a book review because all we ever talked about was books. And I loved it. I loved the feeling of it. And eventually asked me if I wanted his job. so one thing led to another. And I do remember the book. Yes. I do indeed. It's gone on to be revered. But I did not revere it myself. Let's see here. Abirami says, "Steve, have you ever listened to any Indian music? I know you spent some time in India, so you've probably come across popular Bollywood songs, etc. But I have. Yes. Never did much for me, but then again, music that isn't John Philip Sousa tends not to." Olive McQueen says, "Hi, Steve. Sorry for the supplementary question, but I'm curious. Who do you consider the best Irish writer of the 21st century so far?" Sally Rooney, of course. Not just the best Irish writer of the 21st century, but the best writer of any nationality in the 21st century. And not just the 21st century, but all of recorded literary history. Any recommendations for 21st century Irish fiction? I like Adrian McKinty very much. And Bernard McClavery is still writing. He just had a big collection of short stories. View from the Bar. Oh my God. Do we have time? We do, unfortunately. View from the Bar. Let's see what's on his mind today. Oh my God, it's a barrage of questions. All right, well. Number 1. It's too late for me to private this channel, so we have to do a View from the Bar's questions. What is bothering Alex today? All right, Donoghue, now you listen. Oh my God, he's in a feisty mood. Number 1. If you had to sign a contract with Hackwork Inc. and churn out 3 200-page novels in a year, Which genre would you sign for? Are you implying I don't do that? Hmm? Uh, Probably. Well, I wouldn't. I would tell Hackwork Inc. the same thing that I tell all the real Hackwork Incs. that already exist in the world. I would say, give me you're tired, you're hungry, and you're poor. Just send it all to me, slop it in my direction, and I will fix it. I don't. I wouldn't specify. No way. Uh, Number two. Oh my God, there's so many questions here. What from the past 50 years or so has been the most inventive slash entertaining twist on the vampire mythos? I would give it to Anne Rice. I know that's hackneyed now. People should remember how much she revolutionized the genre. She really did. It, it used to be that vampires were, if they were sexually or romantically compelling figures, it was in a bad way. It was in the way of the sirens drawing you to your doom. It wasn't in a good way. It wasn't in a clean, genuinely hero of the story way, and she made it that way. So that these were, yes, blood-drinking creatures of the night, but they were also the heroes. They were also the lovelorn figures, or in the Vampire Lestat's case, the brash ultra hero. And she had to cut a lot of corners to do that. A lot of corners that I didn't agree with at the time, way back in ye olden days in the 80s. I would often opine, but what does it say that you're supposed to cheer that in order to sanitize the image of your vampire, they just kill and drain drug addicts or homeless people, people who won't be missed, criminals? What does it say, not just about the morality of your vampire, but the society's morality that you think is going to find that okay? That it was a very Thatcherite. It was a very Thatcherite way to change vampires, where suddenly they were making moral judgments about their victims in order so that you could like them as heroes. Until it eventually just evaporates completely. I mean, I followed the adventures of Lestat. I was blown away by the novel, The Vampire Lestat. I loved it. And I love Queen of the Damned, but even by the end of Queen of the Damned, the idea that any of Anne Rice's vampires ever actually need to stop for a meal, so to speak, it sort of just goes away. they're just vampires because they're called that, and that has stayed true. All those books spawned a gigantic subgenre in the romance genre, for instance, of whole societies of sexy vampires, and they never feed. They never do. Anyway, and it continued. That kind of victimless vampire continued even in the Twilight Saga, in a way that naturally offended Steve quite a bit, because the Cullen clan kills and eats animals instead of humans, because the writer thought, well, there's no way to do it here. There's no way to make this guy the romantic lead of the novel if every 2 days he has to kill a nurse or a PDA or something like that. Anyway, number three. What's the best unpublished Cuban indie thriller of 2022, preferably one with dogs? You got a lot of leeway, bub. Don't abuse it. you have what a friend of mine a long time ago called the Steve Donoghue Genius Grant, which he characterized way back in the late 70s as a slight easing of the weight on the shoulders once you prove that you're the real deal. But don't push it, okay? Cutie pie. Number four. Oh my God, it's like a dissertation. Number four is 1,000 words long on its own. All right, let's go through this here. Christopher Hitchens is one of the few writers I've heard dismiss Noam Chomsky, arguing that Chomsky pays no mind to the intentions of a political maneuver and instead judges it exclusively on its consequences. Now, at 93, he's still a formidable voice in the world affairs, but occasionally says something strange, like predicting in 2021 that Trump would create a shadow government at Mar-a-Lago and that his followers would anoint the resort a true White House and make pilgrimages and take orders. Okay, well, they don't make pilgrimages, but the Republican Party is a gigantic power in the United States, and it is run from Mar-a-Lago, so that prediction was not wrong. and try getting an elected Republican at any level of state, local, or municipal government, except for Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and Mitt Romney. Aside from that three, try getting an elected Republican to call Joe Biden President Biden. They don't do it. And there's a reason for that. They're not doing it just because they don't want to annoy Donald Trump. It's because they think Donald Trump is president. They refer to him as President Trump. They never refer to him as an ex-president. So I don't know how. I don't know how completely wrong that prediction was, but you have a lot more to say, so let's continue here. I've seen you roll your eyes while unboxing some of Chomsky's newer books over the years, but I'm wondering how you regard his work, and if he might fall into your category of dude bro. Seems like a lot of comments in his videos are viewers simply gaping at the scope of his references rather than his ideas, like he might have accidentally created a cult of personality. You put a question mark after accidentally, but I agree with it. I think he did create a cult of personality, and I think it was an accident. I think no one's was more abashed about it than he is. I get the strong suspicion. There are all sorts of ungentlemanly things to say here, especially as one old coot to another, but I'm not sure about Chomsky right now. Let's just put it that way. His pronouncements, when I see them in 2021, 2022, I think mainly of loss rather than of the content of what he's saying, and that always bothers me. I would hope that if I reach that point, the people around me, the people in my life, will shut me up. The people around me will stop me from going on CNBC. I'm hoping that that would happen. Don't say it already has and that they already don't. Okay? I think you know what I mean. There's a sharpness that's not there anymore. But I have rolled my eyes at books of his. I've been rolling my eyes at him for 50 years. This kind of blanket Eeyore type doomsaying that he does, just where the United States has never done anything good, it constitutionally can't do anything good, and anyone who praises anything that it ever does is a fool or complicit with the enemy. That sort of thing. I'm not saying, I'm not taking a John Wayne style my country right or wrong here, but Chomsky's the other end of the spectrum there, and I don't like end of the spectrum thinking no matter what it is, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And my own cult of personality is entirely intentional. Let's see here. Number 5. If you were in Biden's position, how would you handle Putin? I think he's doing just fine. It's a very complicated situation. A situation that a year ago he would not have predicted, nor would anyone around him have predicted it. Not the lack of Russia's success. Boy, it's been a jumpy day here. Lots and lots of people dying or burning their hands off or accidentally knifing their children. It's been a really jumpy day here. I forget where I was before that pierced the video. Right. Not that Russia's military forces would grind to a halt, would have such a hard time in what they thought was going to be a cakewalk in Ukraine, but the other end of it, the other part of it. I don't think a year ago anyone, Biden included, thought that Putin would make so many open pronouncements about how willing he is to unleash nuclear war if he doesn't get his way in Ukraine. I think that came out of left field for everybody, and that, of course, completely complicates things. It completely complicates things. I always want to say to people say, well, I know some people who say, well, if nukes start to fly over there, lucky thing we're over here. That's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. I don't think anybody saw that coming, and that adds an element to the whole thing. I believe that it was coming straight from a briefing that underscored that fact, that mad dog element, that led to Biden's famous ad-libbed quip about how this guy cannot stay in power. I totally agree with that. If he's willing to threaten thermonuclear detonation of the entire world, if he doesn't get his military conquest in Ukraine, how much more of an explicit comparison with Adolf Hitler do you need? Except that Hitler couldn't destroy the world, and this guy can. And so Biden has a tough line to walk here. He has to make sure that Ukraine does not fall. But he also has to avoid an open conflict with a guy who's crazy, with a dictator who has clearly lost his mind. I always want to say to people like this, whether it's Trump or whether it's Putin, you realize you would die too, right? But anyway, let's see here. Congrats on the milestone. Please stop vaping. A little bit of projection there. Buckaroo. Right, well, we're finally done with a view from the bar, but that also exhausts this video. I've got to go and have some bourbon, but I'll be back for part 2.